Susan Chapman-Hughes is a powerhouse of a woman, mother, and business person. She has sat in the top executive level of companies like American Express and Citigroup and on major corporate boards across the country. Her tenacity and belief in herself and her abilities come from the love and support of her two parents who were always staunchly in Susan's corner. Her mother, in particular, taught her life lessons as a child that have become foundational to her worldview today. Her mother gave her unconditional love and permission to try things even if she failed. She instilled in Susan a sense of self-confidence and the belief that she always belonged, that who she was good enough, and that she had a right to inhabit any space that she chose to occupy in her life. Lessons she instills in her daughter and the many young people, women, and people of color Susan mentors today. Her approach to life and business is straightforward and hopefully replicable. Your difference is your power, and you have a lot more power than you know. To meet big moments in life, you must do so with empathy. And people are always going to judge you, so navigate life in a way that works best for you. Hello and welcome to At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a multimedia platform that brings together people from a diverse background of lives, careers, and experiences who all share one thing in common. They have stepped fully into the transformative power of finding and raising their voices to make an impact on the world we live in today. At the Podium holds a space for everyone to share their stories, to be heard, and to bring us inspiration. Today, I'm thrilled to share the podium with Susan Chapman-Hughes. As an innovative leader of positive transformation, Susan Chapman-Hughes is passionate about aligning organizations with their defined missions and their values. She believes in taking a people-centered approach to inclusive, empowering, and energizing leadership for all stakeholders involved. She most recently was the EVP GM of Global Digital Capabilities, Transformation, and Operations in the Global Commercial Services Division at American Express, where she led the digital transformation of customer experience and drove the use of big data, predictive analytics, and machine learning to power business strategy. Ms. Chapman-Hughes managed a global team of more than 1,500 people. She was recently named one of the Elite 100 by Diversity Woman, and in 2020, she was recognized as one of the most influential women in payments by Payment Source. She has also been named to the Griot 100 by Griot.com NBC Universal, and as one of the 100 most creative people in business by Fast Company. Ms. Chapman-Hughes holds a Master of Business Administration in Real Estate and Land Economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She also holds a Master in Regional Planning from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from Vanderbilt University. Ms. Chapman-Hughes resides in New York with her husband and her daughter. Okay, Susan, welcome to At the Podium.
Hey, Patrick, it's great to be here.
Okay, you are a first for me. I have given a lot of love to my Yale people, my Yale education, but you are the first Vandy person on this platform with me. So you're pulling off the Band-Aid. Thank you.
Well, there you go. I mean, every now and then you got to go way back.
Way back, way back. I mean, and when we were at Vanderbilt, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the president of the Black Student Alliance
For
your
two,
senior year, right?
my junior and my senior year.
Okay. Because I remember we would go there on Thursday nights to watch The Cosby Show
Yeah, right?
and A Different World from the whole thing. We are really dating ourselves, but we look good.
Yes, we do. And so for you young people, go look it up.
Go look it up. You'll see what we're talking about.
Right.
But no, I'm so happy that you agreed to sit down with me today. You've had such an amazing career since we were last together in the early 90s.
Right.
I mean, talk about intersectionality. That describes your life and your career in so many ways. So we're going to get right into it. I was researching you online and I found this really wonderful quote from you. You were doing an article with Impact, and I'm going to read it. You said, "When you're the only one in the room, you can't hide. I've been called every label there is, but I use it as fuel to find strength and confidence within me. Because when you enter rooms where people are using stereotypes to judge you, you'd better be comfortable in your own skin. When you come from a group that has always been valued as less than, and you face the microaggressions we face daily, you need a mental fortitude to get through it. When the images you see tell you that how you look and act are wrong, you wake up in the morning thinking that in order to live in the world, you have to be something you're not. So you have to find or create places where you're accepted as yourself. You have a lot more power than you know."
Absolutely.
What led you to that realization?
First of all, I'm just appreciative of the fact that I had wonderful parents, and in particular, a very close relationship with my mother, who is my original role model. And my mom did a couple of things for me that I now, as a parent, I realize are so valuable. The first is she gave me unconditional love. And so, she's always like, I don't care what you do, I'm always going to love you. I may not like it, but I'm always going to love you. And then the second is she instilled a sense of self-confidence in me that always made me feel like I belong. And she would say things like, well, go try it, because if it doesn't work out, you can always come home, but remember, you belong. And so, those little subtle messages throughout the years gave me the fuel to recognize that it was completely okay for me to be in any space that I was in. And that no matter, what other people said, that I was just as entitled to be in those spaces. And I was there because I wanted to be, not because somebody else wanted me to be there. And I think that's always been a way that I've just thought about navigating my life, because I've made some very interesting choices and pivots from a career perspective. Sometimes people are like, why are you doing that? But it's like, because what I want. This is how I realized that I want to live my life out. I had a plan. Plan may have changed, but it's my plan, and I'm going to work my plan. And as long as I'm giving and bringing people along the way, then I feel like I should be able to do whatever I want. But people are always going to judge you no matter what, no matter whether or not you like it or not. I was actually also reflecting on some of the things that crazy people I've worked for have said to me and about me to my face. Mm-hmm. So it's like, imagine what they said behind my back. But I also realized that, I was like, listen, that's your problem. It's not my problem. And I'm going to navigate in a way that works for me, regardless of whether or not you like it or not. And, it served me well throughout the years. And I also think that, when I talk to young people now, they are yearning to be themselves. They don't want to have to create space for carrying two personas. And, you're much better when you can just be yourself. And so it's important just to seek spaces where people accept you for who you are, or you can create space for who you are, rather than trying to, fit in places where people are just going to reject you because of stereotypes or other stupid things.
I think one thing that you said that really sort of went off when you were talking inside of me just now was that words have power.
That's right.
And that the fact that your mother was able to say to you, be you, do you, I may not agree with it, I may not like it, but I'm still going to love you, is literally freedom. That's for right. A young person.
That's right. And, again, like as a parent now, just the other night, I was having a conversation with my daughter, and she was feeling a little down because she wears glasses. And she's the only kid in her class who wears glasses. And she's, feeling, and she also is like super creative and thinks very differently than a lot of her classmates. She's not a linear thinker. She is a creative, great problem solver. And so she's seeing herself stand out differently than her classmates at 6 years old, which is fascinating to me. She's got very high EQ. And so I was talking to her, and she was like, Mommy, I really feel like I'm struggling with, why am I so different? I wear glasses, I feel like I'm different. And so we had a whole conversation about how that difference is actually her power. And I gave her several examples of how she stands out and how people have recognized her in the sea of other kids and how they've remembered her because of how the impression that she's made on them. And I had just also gotten a letter from one of her classmates' moms. So the kid is new to the school. And the mom reached out to me and sent me a note to say thank you because Parker had reached out to this kid and really welcomed him into the classroom and like sought him out to play with him because she saw that other kids were not playing with him. And we were at a birthday party the other day, and his mom had given him a haircut that he didn't love. And so he was wearing a hat and didn't want to wear the hat. And so somehow or another, the hat came off. And Parker was like, "Oh, you got your haircut. It's actually pretty cool." And it totally changed his outlook. And so she was saying that, that was the confidence booster that he needed. And I told her, I said, that makes you unique and special. And so I think that, I want to speak that kind of life into her the same way my mom spoke it into me, because she's destined for big things and she's going to have to be confident, because we already see it where she shows up in rooms and people are like, okay, so you got to know how to navigate that early.
It's a curse and a blessing because it puts a lot of pressure on young people when they're at such a young age already identifying that they're going to be a special person. I think having the support of a parent is critical. And I bring that up because we recently did an interview with a gentleman named Connor Schoen, who runs an organization called Break Time in Boston. And they were saying that part of the work they do is help young people find jobs who are facing homelessness. And he was saying that 40% of youth on the street come from homes, LGBTQ plus homes, where the parents rejected their identity or their sexual preference. And it was striking and heartbreaking to me because unlike what you're doing for your daughter, the parents play such a huge role in the life of a child. Yes. And not being able to give that support, whether you like it or not, is immaterial. The person standing before you as a child needs your help, your love, your guidance.
As adults and as leaders, it is, and I try to have this philosophy with the teams that I work with, but, it's our responsibility to stand on our principles and our morals and our values. And sometimes that means you have to stand against people who have different perspectives and visions. I can't imagine a scenario where I would not love my child and respect and support. I learned very early, even at 3 months old, she was yearning for independence. She was already holding the bottle on her own. And it dawned on me, I was like, well, look, my job is actually to shepherd and to help her be the best person that she can be, because she doesn't belong to me. And I also realized that, she belongs to the community and to the world. And so it's my job to teach her how to protect herself and how to thrive in those environments, rather than have her be a carbon copy of what I want or who I am. And I tell her all the time, you don't have to do anything that I've done. I want to put you in circles so you have the opportunity to have the exposure, but you certainly need to chart your own path and do your own thing. And whatever that is fine.
It kind of reminds me of the Khalil Gibran poem about your children and not your children. They're life's longing for themselves and they come through you, but they are not of you.
You. That's right.
You talk about your daughter being creative, and I know looking at your career, you have had a very beautiful career, but very much in the business, engineering, community planning, finance side of the sphere of business. And we'll talk about that. But I want to talk about your piano playing.
Yeah.
Because A, I never knew you played the piano.
Really?
B, I never knew you wanted to go to college to study the piano. And your dad was like, you're going to get a real job.
Ma'am. He was like, absolutely no, ma'am. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because, I started the first gospel choir at Vandy. So, and it's so funny because Henry Beelan lives here in New York and he always gives me a hard time about coming to his church to play. But, look, the music thing for me, my mom had like this list of things that she was like, my children will do even if I didn't do them growing up. At the top of that list was, you will play an instrument and learn music. Then it was, you will learn how to swim. You will learn how to cook. You will learn, how to clean. You will know how to take care of yourself. You will travel. And so there's like all these things, but music was one of those things. So all of me and all my siblings played an instrument or two. growing up, so much so that, at one point in time, my parents had like a political fundraiser at our house, and like my sister and I were like the music, entertainment, and my brother. We had our own little trio thing. It was like, oh, okay, cool. So music has always been a thing for me that is, it's comfort. It's like it's an opportunity to be creative. I certainly don't practice the piano as much as I should, but I do now more because I'm trying to be an example for my daughter, because she is like way more gifted musically than I ever was, especially at this age. I mean, she's got perfect pitch. She can sing literally anything at this. And like every week, it's like, well, what? Where you learn that? And then you're like, it's just her gift. And so for me, the music now is an opportunity for me and her to bond, right? And so we've now limited video. She can't watch them during the school week because she was having some challenges focusing. And so like now she's like, well, what am I supposed to do? So the first couple of days, it was painful for all of us because we were like, oh my God, like what are we going to do with this girl? And then she started just being creative. And so one day I said, why don't we just start picking, well, I'll be the DJ. We'll pick the songs that you want to sing, and we'll put on the karaoke version and we'll sing. And we'll work on a couple of things. So we'll work on harmony. So now she and I harmonize together when we sing together. And then, a couple nights a week, we just go to the piano and just have a jam session and just sit down and do our thing. So, it helps me stay creative. I've always been a left brain, right brain person. As I was explaining to somebody who I was talking to earlier, I was like, I like to be big with bold and vision and try new things, but I like to put the points on the board too.
I grew up playing, I think the first instrument I learned was the guitar, and then I learned the piano, and then I learned the saxophone. That first phase of learning an instrument and learning music is so, you just kind of have to sit there and learn it. You have to learn the chords. You have to learn the progressions and the keys. But when you get through all of that, you can play, you can have fun with it. Do you still consider yourself an artist? Is that pianist still in you?
Okay, my definition of artist is like, will somebody pay you? So
Susan.
So I feel like I could probably get paid from somebody's church on Sunday. So we're gonna go with yes. We're gonna say yes to the artist.
I love your very practical view of what an artist is.
Anybody calling me going like, oh, we want to hear Susan sing, like, okay.
Susan.
Especially not now with Parker. So
Susan, you, in addition to being an artist, a paid artist, you have described yourself as a strategic disruptor and a provocateur and an innovative leader of positive transformation. And I was so excited about your use of the word provocateur, because I've had 40, 50 people on this show and they've never described themselves as a provocateur. I was really fascinated by that, because one can say that the level of achievement that you have realized in business is indeed provocative. It's a provocative act because there is still a perception that these roles in financial services are the domain of old white men. And here you are just, you're busting down these walls. And so I want to know why you chose that word, provocateur.
Well, because I'm, like I said, I really love innovation, and I love pushing the envelope and bringing new ideas to the table. And particularly within the construct of a corporate environment, a lot of times that's just really hard. But it goes hand in hand with me standing and being my authentic self. Again, I can come into the room, and whether or not I like it or not, people are going to recognize that I'm there. Like, they're like, who is this black woman with natural hair? And like, and I don't, by the way, I don't wear two-piece suits. Like, I literally don't have coordinates. Like, my glasses are always different. I just learned how to like live in my skin. And because of that, it tends to give me license to be able to push the envelope, but it also gives me license because I'm a relationship person. And so you can be a provocateur when people trust you, and when you have a track record of, leading people through change and leading organizations through big transformations. You have to be provocative because you have to get people to think differently than they did before. And I also believe that, look, I've always had a passion around social justice, around using the platforms that I have to help people who are less fortunate than I am. And so, when you work with young people, they'll call you for who you are. They see through you who you are. And so for me, If I want to be provocative with them to get them to think differently around their lives or their engagements or what they're doing, I have to walk that walk, and I have to show them that I'm willing to try new things and be different and to be provocative. I'm the person who's going to ask the hard question. I'm not the person who's going to sit there and be like, well, should I? I'm not. I won't be rude or disrespectful about it because I don't think that's required. But I will call things out as I see them. And I think it's incumbent upon us who've been put in leadership positions to stand on principle, particularly for people who are less fortunate than we are. You talked about these young people who are homeless. In New York City, I think the statistic is something crazy, like 20 or 30% of the kids who go to public schools here are homeless. Can you imagine you're trying to go and achieve and you're trying to go and, be great because everybody just tells you to take these tests and do whatever, and you don't have a home.
Yeah.
Like, you're living out of a car, you're in shelter. I had a doctor's appointment like a couple of weeks ago, and I was on the train, and there was a young woman who got on the train. Somebody had called her, and she was talking to the person, and she said, yeah, I really want to come, and I'm on my way there, but I'm going to have to hurry up because I have to get back to the shelter before 6 o'clock. Otherwise, they won't let me back in. I mean, this young woman was like beautiful, and she was clearly well-spoken and very sharp. And I was like, I don't even it just kind of grabbed me while we were on the train. And so I was like, you know what? I got to do something. So I just went in my bag, and I had a couple $100s in my purse. I took all the money I had out of my purse, and I was getting ready to get off the train, and she got off the train at the same station. And so we walked up the steps or whatever. And I was like, excuse me. She had her earphones in, and I was like, excuse me. And she turned around and she said, yeah, because in New York, people be like, girl, what are you calling me for? And I said, I was like, I'm not, trying to be whatever. I said, but did I overhear you say that you're living in a shelter? And she was like, yeah. I said, well, I just want to give you this. And if it helps you in any way, by all means, just take it. And she looked down and she started almost crying, and I almost started crying. And she's like, can I hug you? And I was like, absolutely. And I gave her a big old hug. I think that we have to be different. Like, we are called to be different. We are called to use our platforms to be different. And so we have to be provocative in the way we do that. And we have to break the norms. It's okay to be a senior executive and, recognize the humanity in somebody and want to help them. Like, shame on us if we're not those people.
Susan, we had a gentleman who was the very first episode we aired of this podcast for this second season. His name is David Ambrose. He grew up for about the first 18 years of his life living on the streets and then in foster care because his mother suffered from a mental illness.
Yeah.
And he talks about being a 7-year-old child in Grand Central Station in New York, begging for money.
Yeah.
And how the businessmen getting off of the trains just walked past him, didn't even see him. And he talks about, in a very provocative and moving way, the invisibility of homelessness and of people living in shelters, and that we just don't, as a society, really understand how to even acknowledge the existence of people who are in these horrible situations, oftentimes through no fault of their own. But you seeing her was probably one of the most empowering and affirming acts anyone had ever shown to her.
We all are called to serve, right? And especially in the environments that we are seeing now. My mom always used to say that, you have to be the gift that keeps on giving well beyond yourself. And, I just believe that.
You also said something interesting to me about being a provocateur within these spaces that you're in. And I serve on a board, and I understand when you walk into the room and you're the only one, and you can't hide. You're there. That's right. You cannot hide. And I was reading a book called Inclusify by a woman named Stephanie K. Johnson. And she talks about how in boards, in the C-suite, that oftentimes women, people of color, immigrants, don't even want to sit there because they feel tokenized, or they feel like they don't belong at that table, or that they're only there because of their race, their gender, where they come from. And her response is, it doesn't matter. You're there.
That's right.
So speak up, be provocative,
right,
and be present. And all the other stuff, when you're trailblazing, you don't get to pick the circumstances under which you're trailblazing, you
Right.
know. But I think it's really important for people to hear that you may be the only one at the table. That's fine. And you may be the token, but you still need to be engaged in the conversation.
Well, here's what I've learned, Patrick, and I've done business all around the world. I know people all around the world, and what I do know is that at their core, people want the same things. They want to be happy. They want to live a happy life. They want their kids to be successful. They want to be able to, earn a living for them. Now, some people are crazy, but for the most part, I don't care where you go in the world. That's just what people want. And so if you approach it from a relationship building perspective and say, you know what, yeah, we might be different, but I'm going to actually give you the opportunity to get to know me, but you're straight with them, right? You have to be, to this point of being provocative, you can't bend yourself into a pretzel just to make everybody else feel comfortable. Your mere presence means that you have to help break down the stereotypes and the views, because how else are they going to get it? They don't, when George Floyd was murdered, I remember getting so many phone calls from my white colleagues and other people who were like, what should I do? I don't know what to do. And the old Susan was like, well, let me tell you what, here's what I think you, and the new Susan was like, so help me understand, what is it about your life that gives you the privilege that you don't understand how to meet this moment? What is that? Because clearly you voted for Obama, you call yourself a liberal, you got the Black Lives Matter sign in your window at your house, but like, do you actually know Black people? Like real, like other than me, like, do you have relationships with people who are different than you? And for some of them, they were like, you know what? It's a good call out, Susan. I don't. And I thought I was doing things that are differently. I said, if you are a true empathetic leader, we all have to go out of our comfort zone and our boundaries to understand and put ourselves in other people's shoes, And I said, here's a great example. I know a lot of Black executives. So for me to hire Black executives, not a really hard thing. I know exactly where they are. I know who to call to get, etc. But what I realized is like my team was like severely lacking in Latinx talent. And when we thought about our customer base, they're a big part of that. And I was like, wait, I got to figure out how I'm going to change my calculus so that I have more exposure and more friends and more people that I am in relationship with who can help me better understand the perspectives to bring this talent in. Because it's one thing to bring them in, it's a whole nother thing to retain them. And so I had to make some changes around who I was spending time with, building relationships and friendships with other people. And boy, I have learned so much, but I had to push myself out of that comfort zone. And so I think that people, in order to kind of like meet the moment, need to be empathetic, and you got to like put yourself in other people's shoes. But the other thing is for us is like you're at the table, so what you gonna do with it? There's nothing that drives me crazy more than to see people of color who've been given an opportunity to sit in a room who just don't use their power to make differences for people who look like them.
You have to. And I have sat around tables and made many people uncomfortable because I've said uncomfortable things. Like, why is everyone here white but me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the George Floyd question, I think we still haven't found the answer to that, because I think we haven't really been able to grasp what that really meant and why people were so shocked and appalled and unable to actually really enter into that space and understand what was happening there.
I think we know why they were so shocked, right? I think the challenge is what is different around the structures and the institutions that we live in that will change that so that that will never happen again. And that requires people to actually shift the power structure and to think differently around who they bring to the table. I remember years ago going to London to do a deal, and it was the funniest thing in the world because I was with one of my colleagues who was white and British, but he was more junior than I was, and he worked on my team. And so we got to the meeting, and the team that we were doing business with came in and went right to him. Oh, it's so great to see you. Oh, so excited about, doing deals with you all. And then one of them had the audacity to say, oh, as you're here assisting, do you think you can grab coffee for all of us in the room?
No, Susan, no.
I was like, yeah, sure. I'd be happy to get y'all coffee. Who else wants coffee? Anybody else want coffee? And so my colleague is like, his eyeballs are like getting bigger by the moment. So I come back in the door. I asked the woman to help me get the coffee. We come back in, we pass it around, whatever. And so they were like, well, we're waiting for Susan to come so we can get the meeting started. I said, oh, I'm here. How'd you want your coffee? Oh, you wanted it with, oh, okay, cool. Because we're going to have fun now, fellas. And
Oh,
their whole faces were like, I was like, yeah. I was like, I think that just earned me some bargaining points in our deal, right? So I guess you're going to be paying extra. Sorry. But I bet you they won't do that again.
no, no. This is somewhat related to what we're talking about. Are you, and you have a daughter, so you probably are you following the whole Ariel is not black thing that's
Absolutely.
happening? Mhm.
Absolutely.
I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that. My first thought is there's no such thing as a mermaid, so why are we even having this conversation? But to our earlier conversation about who's at what tables and what people are willing to not see,
Yes.
willing to not acknowledge, I find this conversation very interesting because I don't really pay attention to the nonsense of the people who are so up in arms that there is a black Ariel, because that's the same foolishness that we've known all of our lives. Those people are always there. What I'm fascinated by is what the young black girls who are seeing the videos and watching this are realizing about themselves. And I have two responses to that. One, I'm so sad that they are still in 2022, almost 2023, shocked to see a black representation of themselves in a movie. And
Yeah.
that as far as we've come, we still haven't gotten that far to where
Yeah.
that's not a shock for them. The second thing that I'm really moved by in this conversation is that the level of empowerment and joy that it gives these young girls to see a black Ariel.
Yeah.
And it made me think about you because I knew we were going to be talking, and you sit in really provocative spaces as we've discussed. And I wonder how you view your role as a representation for other people looking up to step into the suites, the C suites, the executive
Yeah.
level.
I mean, like, look, in the words of one of my mentors, if you got there and only your dusty butt is still sitting there and you didn't bring anybody with you, then shame on you. So, like, I'll never forget that. Every time I think about Maurice saying that, I just kind of crack up laughing. I was like, Dusty and Ashy, or just Dusty? He was like, Dusty and Ashy. I said, okay, fine. But, look, I have had a career in technology, real estate, financial services. I mean, they're just like in roles, by the way, that there aren't people who look like me. And so my thing is like, look, shame on me if I don't expose a lot of people to this. Because when I was younger, I didn't even know these opportunities existed. I didn't know anybody who worked in business until like I was in high school, and our neighbors, black people, and our neighbors moved across the street, and I got to know them. And he was an executive at P&G, and I was like, well, what is that? That's amazing. And then throughout the years, I learned about people who were on corporate boards, and I was like, black people on corporate boards? Oh my God, like this is like fascinating. And so for me, I want other people who look like me to have, the opportunities, because I also know that is a good business decision, particularly as the world continues to diversify. You need people who can bring different perspectives and who can think differently. The challenge is oftentimes organizations have a perception of who they think the right candidate is. And it usually is some kind of like box cutting, fitting exercise. It's like, oh, well, they did this, they did this, they did this, and they did this. And so as a person who's looking at people and evaluating talent, we have to be the ones to push to change the way organizations think about who's ready and who should be able to sit in that seat. And we should be giving people of color, and particularly black folks, for me, chances that they may not have otherwise had. I remember when I was going through a transformation for one of the businesses I was running, and there was this young black guy who's still a mentee of mine. This guy is like unbelievably sharp, one of the best finance minds I've ever seen. Mm. And I was like, he's in corp dev role now, but he would kill a P&L client-facing GM role. And the guys on my team were like, he's never carried the bag. I don't know how that's going to work. I said, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to give him a chance because I think he's got the core things. He's got great relationship building skills. He's got excellent finance skills. He's got excellent ability to be able to do other things. He's proven that he can be adaptable, that he's great in front of clients. He's great in negotiation, like all the box checking that we need for somebody in this role. And he's a great leader. We're going to give him a chance, and I'm going to support him, even if y'all don't. I'm expecting you to, but even if you don't, And we're going to see where he lands and where his team lands. And within a year, they were number one. And everybody was trying to like get on their coattails. And I reminded them, I said, remember, you guys were the ones who didn't want him. And so we have to use our power. When I get phone calls for boards now, I can't take on another board. But guess what? I have 5 people who are on the ready who I can be like, but you should talk to this person because this person would be great. And because of that, 6 of people in my network have gotten their first board opportunity, which is the way it's supposed to be.
It's interesting that you bring that up because this idea of who's at the table, who's not supposed to be at the table, what requirements you have to be there. You talk about when we were at Vanderbilt, which you called a lesson in what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I concur. I thought Vanderbilt, great memories at Vanderbilt, very challenging times at Vanderbilt in many ways. But you had a dean once say to you that you didn't belong there.
Yeah, he did. And he was like, you'll never do well. I don't know why you're here. And I was like, what? So first of all, what was great about my mom is like I called my mom and literally the next day she drove down to the school and sat in his office until she could talk to him. And was like, if my child doesn't do well because she didn't do the work, that's one thing. But she doesn't do well because we got a problem. And so that was the first lesson for me, which is like, and my mom always used to tell me, you got to stand up for yourself. So, okay, fine. But I'm the kind of person, like if somebody tells me I'm not capable of doing something or I'm not good enough to do that, it's like fuel for me. And I'm also a little petty. So, just to be honest. So every time I was like in a magazine or whatever, I would send it to him and be like, oh, I'm doing so great. Things are so wonderful. Oh my goodness. I just wanted to let you know how I'm doing.
There's something about the power of words that people say. I don't subscribe to sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I think words can be very damaging to people. And you're lucky that you had a mother who drove up to Vanderbilt and sat in that man's office and was like, excuse me, That's right.
But that's where the self-confidence piece has to come in, right? Some people have said in my life, like, oh, so she's kind of arrogant. I'm not arrogant. I know my value and I know my worth, and I'm going to stand up for that. I'm also very coachable, so I know I can learn too, which is why I'm always asking questions and asking for feedback because I want to be able to get better. But I think that, to your point, words are absolutely challenging for people. And I had to learn this about feedback, right? Because, you get feedback from your boss. You're always like, okay, I got to go back and try to work on this or whatever. And one of my mentors was like, you always got to consider the source and you got to consider what their motivation is. And so, I had one situation with she was a white female. I was working for her. And like literally, despite the fact that my numbers were great and we're crushing it and doing whatever, like she always had these like crazy things to say to me. Like one day she was like, oh, you don't go into detail enough. And she just had all this stuff. And so finally I just said to her, I said, it's really fascinating because when I look at your feedback that you give me, it's all about making you more comfortable and making your life easier, which, is fine if that's what you want. But don't try to couch it as if these are the things that are going to make me better because you don't even know me. You haven't even taken the time to get to understand what makes me tick. You don't see value in the path that I take to get to things because you're so limited in your scope. You can't even understand that there are other ways to think about these things. You like people who basically say yes to you or think exactly like you. And so that's about you. That has nothing to do with me. When you think you have some valuable advice you can give me that will help me be better, then let's talk. She didn't like that very much, but
Didn't.
but I had to finally say it because like after 3 or 4 times, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like for real? And I'd ask like very clear questions like, okay, so did we hit our numbers? Yes. Is our scorecard all green? Yes. Okay, so tell me, what is it about how I've delivered that doesn't work for you or isn't good? And she's like, well, okay.
I think what you're describing has happened hundreds of thousands of times over to people. I think that's part of the reason why business is having trouble finding a foothold in a world post 2020 because people are tired.
Not only are they tired, but they have other choices. The combination of exhaustion and choices. And this is why I say to people all the time, Going forward, the EQ in leadership is just as or more important than the IQ, because anybody can figure out how to do the numbers if they put their heads to it. You can learn the technical capabilities of whatever it is you're working on. But that people connection really matters. And people vote with their feet. And if they think that you don't care about them, if they think that you don't understand what makes them tick, if you don't know the names of their kids, right? If you're not invested in their own success, they will vote with either, what do they call it? Quiet quitting, which is like, I'm just not going to work that hard or do my best. Or they're going to leave, and you end up losing really talented people. And you also send a signal to the entire organization about how much you value what is one of the most valuable resources that an organization has, and certainly one of the most expensive. So you're going to spend all that money on paying people and having to pay salaries or whatever. You might as well get the best out of it. And by the way, if you do that, you learn so much, because then people are willing to come to you with ideas. They're willing to share with you where they think there are gaps, because the more senior you get, the less visibility you have to what's going on in the organization. So you need to have people who are going to be like, oh, yeah, hey, can I just talk to you for a second? You need that. And you can't get that if you don't give people the value that they're due.
I know your daughter's young, but how do you, because I know you are, but how do you talk to your child about these issues? Because they're real and they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Straight. You just got to be straight with them.
Yeah.
You have to talk to them in ways that are appropriate for their age, but you cannot act as if it is not an issue and that it isn't there. You have to just be straight with them, because they recognize, I mean, like when Parker was in like the pre-K 3s, she was like, hey, mommy, I was at school today and my skin is darker than everybody else's. Well, okay, guess what? Let's have a conversation about that. Let's talk about what that means. And luckily, she goes to a school that hits these issues head on. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the fact that many of the parents who are there have signed on to trying to raise their kids as global citizens, not as like these people who are ignorant and don't know what's going on. And I'll tell you one really funny story. So at summer camp, they have like free choice time or whatever. And so she came home and she had these papers, these like signs that she had made. And I was like, so I pulled them out and I started laughing. And everybody was like, what are you laughing at? Because this girl had written, "Black is beautiful, bet on black." And so I said to her, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Did you guys have an assignment? We had to like do something on identity, or were you like talking about something? And she's like, no, I just did it during free choice time. And I was like, well, who was there with you? And so she talked about these two little white girls who were with her. And I was like, well, how did that go? She said, well, one of them said that she was really upset with her ancestors about the way that they treated my ancestors. And the other one said that Black people are smart and they are beautiful. And in many cases, they deserve opportunities, and other people steal their ideas. And so I like immediately called the moms and was like, hey, I don't know what you're doing in your household, but I appreciate it.
Oh,
I mean, what do you do? I mean, because these kids are going to have the conversations, right? They're going to get curious about it. They feel the tension in the air. There's no question that they can see, what's going on. And so in order for us to prepare them, you've got to talk to them straight.
I think what helped me get through so much of that growing up was my early education was all private. And I went to an all Black private school. And They were not messing around. They were teaching us Mary McLeod Bethune. They were teaching us Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Sojourner Truth. They were not messing around. Because those people were coming directly out of the civil rights movement to educate our generation. But they knew, they were like, you cannot be a Black person walking around America and not know who you are. Because there's so many things that are telling you that you're wrong, that you're angry, that you're rageful, that you should be poor. And so from a very young age, my mom was very intentional about how I was educated. Now, when I went to the all white schools, there were those periods of adjustments, but it was never based around, I don't know who I am. Because that was never...
That's right.
That was not an option in my household growing up.
I think it has to be that way, because otherwise I think we do our kids a disservice, despite the fact that we would love to see racism and discrimination eradicated. Some people actually are invested in it, and they have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Susan, what has been, you've had such an amazing career and life and journey. What has
Well, it
been,
ain't over yet.
no, you're still on it. We're still on it together.
That's
Thus
right.
far, what has been your biggest leap of faith?
So much of my career has been about taking big chances and taking risk to that point of like having your own yardstick and your own idea of what you want to do. I thought that I was going to have a career in real estate, like just various parts of real estate. It was great. And then I realized, actually, I don't really want to just do this. I really like the bigger problems that the business has. I want to run a business. I want P&L experience. I want to lean into this digital data because I love the technology stuff. And I asked for it. And so I think I was probably one of the first senior executives to switch from an operating to a P&L role, which is pretty risky, right? Because if it didn't work out, oops, bye.
There's no forgiveness if that goes wrong.
Yeah, right. But I like the challenge, right? And I like to. I was talking to my best friend about this. We're actually recording a series of snippets for LinkedIn around career development or whatever. And so we were both talking about the value of doing things where you push yourself out of your comfort zone where the stakes are low so that you build that muscle so that when you get into the corporate environment and you are doing things that make you uncomfortable or could potentially be stressful, you've already stretched that muscle. You already know how to problem solve your way out of things. You already have built relationships around things that could support you and help you. And I just think that that's really critical for people. I was talking to one of my mentors and I was just telling her how much I admire her because, you know, she's in her 70s now, but she's a lifelong learner and like takes on big challenges. And I said, when I see you do that, it just reinforces to me that it's okay for me to keep trying new things and making big, bold decisions about my career or my life. I mean, I left a company that I'd worked at for almost 11 years that I could have stayed at forever, but I didn't think it was the right opportunity for me going forward and like growth for me. And people were like, you did what? Like, it's time to pivot. And you know, like your gut tells you. And if you're spiritual, then you understand, like, it gets real uncomfortable. It does not get easier. And so you have to like follow that. And so I've made some big leaps, but I don't feel like they're big leaps. I feel like they were a plan. I made a plan. I got the support that I needed to be able to do it, and I put together the right steps for me to move on to the next thing before it actually happened. So it is what it is. I've been very blessed and very fortunate.
In this season of the show, Susan, we're talking to people and asking them what they want to say with their voice, if they found their voice, and if they have, what they want to say with their voice and their platform. And I pose that question to you.
I mean, we are in a very interesting time. If you look at what's going on with climate, it's changing the face of the world, literally. It's making the have-nots have less than they already had. Certainly with the kind of social climate and racial climate, not just in the United States, but across the world, facing some really big challenges. You know, people are really seeking leadership and support, and they want the opportunity. You know, I'm so heartened to see these young people step up and become activists around the things that they know are wrong. And so I feel like it is incumbent upon us to create pathways for them to continue to thrive, to make it better for all of us. And I've learned a lot, given the boards that I serve on, about food insecurity. There's so many people who are food insecure. Shame on us. And it's, you know, goes beyond us just wasting a plate of food, right? It's creating opportunities for people to eat good, nutritious food. And so I want to use the platforms that I stand in to be able to help that. The other big thing is around the digitization of the world. That's going to change how people work, who gets access to work, how data is used. You know, when you talk about AI and bias in AI, it's going to take people like me and you to be voices to make sure that we're steering. Those things are not bad things in and of themselves, but used incorrectly and not planned correctly, they could be bad. So we have to create the pathways for those things to actually be impactful and make the world a better place. I look at people like Chef Andres,
Yep.
you know, and what he's doing with World Central Kitchen. And, you know, his perspective is everybody can come together no matter what issue or problem it is around a table. And I think historically around the tables that I've sat around and broken bread with people, and I think he's right. And at our core, just going back to something I said earlier, people really do want the same things. Most people do. And if we can just tee off of that as the core, then we can actually open ourselves to being different and being supportive to help people who are less fortunate than we are.
Susan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
I've loved talking to you.
Absolutely. Yes, it's also always great to support Vandy Fam. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you for agreeing. I appreciate it. And to those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice. Use yours wisely. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.